Okay, just watched a little video about the silos and stuff, and now we're going to actually go into the silo.
Good morning. Welcome to the Titan Missile Museum. I'm Larry. I'm going to be your tour guide today. And Rex is going to be backing me up, and he also operates as a safety officer. And as soon as he gets over here. What I'm going to try to do is take you back about 40, 50 years into the middle of the Cold War, because at that time, that's when this site was in operation. And there were 54 of these sites scattered across southwestern United States, and nothing really interesting with the site above ground. It's about a 3-acre site surrounded by a security fence. But there's a prominent feature in the middle of the site, this big beige concrete and steel door, silo closure door. It weighs 760 tons because its purpose is to protect the missile, which is down below, from a nearby nuclear explosion. That door could be opened on those rails that you see there. It is now fixed into the half open, half closed position because we want everybody to know this isn't an active site anymore. I talked about the silo. The silo is about 150 feet deep because it had to be big enough for that big missile that's in there. And the missile is 103 feet tall. Now, that's just a number, it's hard to recognize that. But if I took that out and stuck it next to that flagpole over there, it'd be twice as high as that flagpole. So you can imagine the size of that missile. So with a missile that big, we had to have a big warhead, right? So that warhead had an explosive yield of 9 million tons of TNT. Another number, what does that mean? Well, you know that they dropped bombs on Japan at the end of the Second World War. This bomb was over 650 times the yield of that bomb. And if you take all the bombs that were dropped during the Second World War and add them all together, we wouldn't even come to half the explosive yield of this one missile bomb. And the U.S. Air Force had 54 of these aimed at the enemy during the Cold War. Luckily, we never had to use it. And that's the largest bomb that the U.S. Air Force ever used. Okay, down below, about 35 feet below, right over in this area over here, is a control room. And in that control room was a four-person crew. Their job was to wait for the radio message that would tell them the time had come to launch the missile. Turn that key and launch that missile. And again, that's all they did was wait. They were serving a 24-hour shift. They were usually 1 day on, 3 days off. But in the Air Force, your body is on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They would start the day by going to the base up in Tucson. They would report up there and they'd get a briefing. And then they'd get their codes and they'd get all the stuff they'd need for their 24-hour shift to get in a truck, and they'd drive down here and arrive at that gate. Now, the security of the site is this method of 4 phone calls that you need to get in here. First phone call they get just tells the crew they're at the gate, unlatch the gate. First step after the gate is unlatched, the commander had 3 minutes to get to the base of that first flight of stairs and make the second phone call. And the purpose there was if there was any problem up above here, he could just delay his getting to the point, or just stand here and shuffle his feet or something. If he took more than 3 minutes, the on-duty crew would declare the site locked down, and they would call the security people, the roving security teams, and they'd come out and investigate. After he makes that second phone call, that gets him into the entrapment area, and then he can go in there and enter the code that you saw in the movie. After that was all perfect, then he could bring his crew into the entrapment area. They would be visually checked with a security camera that's in there, closed circuit TV camera, and if they passed the muster, then they would open the gate to get them out of the entrapment area, and they'd go down 35 feet down, and they'd get to blast door 6, where we're going to pick up the tour. Now, in the movie, they talked about the security of those gypsies, those scoop antennas there, those 4 pair that are around the silo closure door. They didn't talk about the 2 that are over here, and it looks like they're guarding the air conditioning. Wrong, the air conditioning was added by the museum, but in that yellow square down in the bottom there, that's the air shaft. There was a grate down there, and that was the way they got the air down to the control room. So of course we'd want security on that. So if you just follow me,
You need to go in the elevator.
With Rex.
Everybody needs to go in the elevator. Stay with me.
And use the handrail. Watch your step. You don't want anybody getting hurt. As we get down in there, you may want to take off your sunglasses. And if you can hold the door for the person. Hold on, guys. We're now 35 feet below the surface. And when we as an incoming missile would arrive at this point, that door would be closed and locked. We would make the 4th phone call over here. But since we've used up all our security to get to this point, the 4th phone call was just saying, hey, we're at blast door 6. The crew would then push a button on their console, and at the same time we'd push a button here, and that would retract these 4 pins, which would unlock the door, and then we'd pull that door open. And I'll talk a little bit about the door a little later. Titan II is a retaliatory missile. It would only be used if we were under attack. And if we were under attack, we would assume a nuclear attack. And this facility is built to survive what's called a nearby nuclear miss. Anything within 1 mile, all bets are off. But anything a mile away, the nuclear bomb that would explode. You saw in the film, there's 3 features of this bomb. Features, that's a good word for it. There's a solar wind that comes out and just destroys everything like you saw in the movie. Then there's also a seismic wave, which is like an earthquake, which would shake through the ground. And then the last thing is there's an electromagnetic pulse, which had the capability of destroying, frying all the electronics in here. We got to protect against all of those, and we're not going to be able to retaliate. Electromagnetic pulse was fairly easy because all we had to do was put 1/4-inch steel all around the complex, weld it together, and then ground it. And so anything on the inside is what the engineers would call a Faraday cage. And so the electromagnetic pulse would not get in there. Okay, this blast wave, this wind, massive amounts of concrete and steel. This is 4 feet thick. Ceiling and the floor are 5 feet thick. Inside there that you can't see is a lattice worth of reinforced rebar that is, some of it is as big as my forearm and my wrist here. And it's boxed and welded on 9-inch centers. So it's a real dense lattice work. Once the lattice work is built, then we would pour concrete in here. from a batch plant that was built on the surface. And the concrete would come in on a 24-hour pour until we got done with the pour. And as a result, you don't see any bubbles, cracks, seams. And this concrete was poured over 50 years ago. So who knows how long it's going to survive. The door, welded I-beam. It weighs, like I said, 6,000 pounds. It's got a polished edge around it and a neoprene seal so that when that door is closed and locked, it's essentially airtight. Because what we got behind me here is, most people would call it an airlock. The Air Force called it a blast lock. So only one door can be opened at a time. They're electronically locked. And so to get the next door, I have to close and lock this one behind me. There's two of these glass locks here. This one, which is to protect everything from the nuclear explosion, which would probably destroy a good part of the stuff that's out here. And then there's another glass lock that protects the crew from if the missile explodes or something like that. We'll not talk about that. Okay, now the second thing that we got to protect against is this seismic wave that comes through the ground. And the way the engineers did that is everything that was critical, including the missile itself, was mounted on springs. So as you walk in here, you're going to see that these lights, follow me, you can see that these lights are critical. Those lights, these lights, emergency lights. This equipment here is mounted on a panel. It's got two springs up there, and so this thing can move up and down if there's a seismic wave in here. Now, I mentioned the door, that when they unlocked it, they pulled it open. 6,000 pounds. We're going to show you, demonstrate how easy it is to move 6,000 pounds if you put your mind to it. So just give a pull and lean back. Oh, well, look at that.
Wow, pretty strong.
If the car needs a push,
There you
there you go. There's your man. That card I gave him said that he moved 6,000 pounds. That door was mounted here 55 years ago or so, and it's a 1/4 inch off the floor, and it's still a 1/4 inch off the floor. Our homes are not built with this kind of construction, let me tell you. So if you'll follow me into the control room. It separates from the reentry vehicle, and the reentry vehicle travels the last miles, last 30 minutes, coasting to the target. So the guidance system has to have that missile fly this exact trajectory and know exactly when to shut that stage 2 engine down so it would hit the target. And we're talking about a target at 6,000 miles away that we're going to hit within 1 mile, and it does that. Now, how do these targets get put in here? The targets are really put in as this trajectory, and the way they're put in, these 3 targets, is put in on punch paper tape. And you say, punch paper tape, that's an old system, we probably wouldn't use that again. But this is developed to program the weaving looms in England in the 1800s. And is still used today for highly secure communication, because you can't modify that in any way. This is a Mylar representation, but the paper, you can't erase it with a magnet. You can't rip it open. You can't. There's nothing you can do to change this. You can't read it. And even if you did, I don't know if you could understand it. But we use it to this day. So every time they put in a new target, in our case, they never did put in new targets. But they went through the reader, was processed here, and then this panel here would compute what the trajectory would actually be, and it'd be shipped out to the missile. So anytime they changed one of those 3 targets, they would have to do that. Now, one thing that stands out about this piece of gear here is there's a bunch of panels that say blank panels. And of course, I have to tell you the story behind this. Because in the 1960s, this was all filled with 1960 electronics. Transistors. We all remember them. But by the mid-1970s, we were starting to run out of spare parts, and nobody made transistors anymore. They were into integrated circuits, chips, and everything else that we have to this day. Luckily for the Air Force, they were able to find a guidance system that had been developed for the Boeing 747, which could be modified for use in the missile complex. So they changed out all this equipment, they put in new computers in the missile, new guidance system. Those computers, the initial one was 1 kilobytes of memory, RAM. Then they put in the new one that was 4. We would laugh if somebody tried to sell you one of those today. But they were able to do the job. Now, the Titan II, as I said, the retaliatory missile. The mission statement of the Titan II was peace through deterrence. In other words, let the enemy or our adversaries know about this missile, where it was located, how accurate it was, how reliable it was, and that it was in a hardened state here. So they would not attack us because they knew that we would reply in kind. That worked for the 24-year life of the Titan system. And today it's working for the Minuteman missiles that we have up in North Dakota and Montana. But to launch the missile, we had to be under attack, and the person that decided that was the President of the United States, and he would order a retaliatory strike. The way that happened, we got a radio message. Okay, when they got that warbling sound and the Alpha 2, commander would grab her book and start copying those characters as they came in. And there was about 35 of them. When the message got done, it would say, message ending and repeating. And it would repeat again, and we'd trade books, and you would check my work and I would check your work, because we have to make sure that we agree that we are getting a launch message, because only then would we open the safe. And the message would keep playing until we were sure. We open the safe and we get out the packet. The keys are in there. There's a decoding book. Also, there's authentication cards, because we have to make sure the president is ordering this. This isn't somebody out in the parking lot sending us a message. This is coming from the president. So we have authentication envelopes, and this is a crude representation that the museum has come up with. And if the second line of the thing, the first 2 characters are X-ray Bravo, XB, then we would open the XB envelope and we would get a little thing that they call the cookie. And it's got XB, and then it's got 5 other characters. We would match all 7 characters with the 7 characters that we have written down on the second line there. Third line, there's 6 characters. They go right here. That's the butterfly valve code, and that's the only way the crew would get that. Put it in, we're ready to go. The third line there, fourth line really, is a coded representation of the launch time. And we would decode that and write the launch time across the face of the clock. Now, launch time is not instantaneous, because this is a coordinated attack with bombers and weapons coming in from other places, and we don't want them to interfere with each other. But when we get the launch time, we're going to prepare by sticking the keys, which have been in the safe, in. She puts hers in the middle of her console. I put mine over here. You'll notice that there's 7 feet between them, 2 people. Air Force really makes it difficult. These are spring-loaded switches. They're spring-loaded in the off position. We turn them within 2 seconds of one another, and then we hold them for 5 seconds. Ready, left hand. You because you're gonna see all those lights move over there, so they'll tell you when you can let go. So I'm gonna give you a countdown, 3, 2, 1, turn to the right.
Oh, right, sorry.
And we're gonna hold it for 5 seconds. And then you're gonna see lights come on there that weren't on there before. We've started a launch sequence. Once this is started, you can leave, essentially, because you can't turn back. You can't shut it off now, because it's 58 seconds, we're gonna launch. Right now, we're charging the batteries in the missile, pouring electrolyte into these dry cells. After we get done with that, we're going to open the silo closure door, and power is going to be on its own, and we're going to get the beam broken. Let it shut that off. Then we're going to do a final check of the guidance system. You'll see lights on over there. Then we're going to get to a point where those butterfly valves are going to be opened up, the propellants are going to flow together, the engines are going to ignite, lots of fire alarms are going on. This is authentic, then. And the last thing that we're going to get is right there, and you can say, what is it?
Lift off.
Lift off. That missile is going to come out of the silo. It's going to burn for 5.5 minutes. It's going to deliver that payload toward target 2. And target 2 is going to cease to exist in about 30 minutes. Now, I'm letting you out of here without a remembrance here. But she gets a little card that says she turned the key.
Now, what's the crew supposed to do at this point?
That's what I was just going to talk about. Let's be realistic. There's a set of procedures. Close the silo closure door, put out the fires, and wait for further orders. Sounds like you know. A war, nuclear war. I got it. And you can keep that one. But never mind. I had a backup system. So, let's be practical. You've got 30 days of food and water here. Maybe 15 days worth of air, depending on how many people are in here. So you're not going to get any orders. 4 people, in the whole scheme of things. Yeah. The bottom line is that you're going to die. They got a pretty cushy job for their time, but they did their job, turned the key when they got the orders to do so, but now they're expendable. And because, they got emergency hatch that they can go up the air shaft and get out, but who knows what it's going to be like up there. That's why I always say that let's be realistic. They're going to die. And they're trained for it, and they're ready to accept that. Okay. But they were highly trained, and of course that element was tested. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go down about 250 feet down the corridor down here, and we're going to take a look at the missile in the silo. can look at this missile because the museum has got 2 additional windows in here. So just spread yourself around.
Either side.
Either side. Well, no, there's nothing about it. Now, if you were a crew member, you would be coming down here during your shift to do the preventive maintenance, whether it's got, for leaks and adjustments and things like that. We're all doing stuff. There was only one entrance, and that was it there. It was blocked, closed and locked because we kept that silo at 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And you see the wood platforms there, which would be up during the watch. They would be down when they were working. And when the museum cut the additional windows in, they also removed the wood platforms. So those are the best windows to look at. Now that's a real Titan II missile, and that's not a mock-up. That's a real missile, and we're lucky to have it. And it came off the assembly line at the Martin Company in Colorado. It came off the assembly line in April '62. And instead of being used as a test vehicle, it was shipped to Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, where it was used as a training aid for the school that trained all the missileers. All the missileers for the 24 years went through that school before they were sent out to the sites. So on that missile, they could see what they were actually going to be working with in the field. Reason we like that missile is because it never had propellant on board. And so as a result, it didn't have to be scrubbed to be able to put it in a facility like this. You can feel safe breathing the air. The other Titans that are at other museums are above ground, so they get plenty of air.
So the original Titan that was in the silo was removed?
It was. I'll talk about that too. Okay, Titan II. Got time. The Titan II, the first ones went on alert in 1963. The last one went off in 1987. And the reason that they were deactivated is they got too expensive to operate. Bottom line. And deactivation meant that the missiles were removed, the warheads were sent back to Texas where they were developed. And then the silo, the top 25 feet was imploded, and everything was thrown down into the silo. It was sort of like a landfill almost for the site. And then they capped it up with a concrete cap. So none of these Titan II silos are available for housing units. The Titan II was also used to launch NASA's Gemini space program, 2-man astronaut cruise when launched into near Earth orbit, where they could practice the skills they would need when they went to the moon in the Apollo mission. And then after the deactivation, the missile was still reliable. It was just expensive. And so the Air Force took 14 of them and had them retrofitted, and then they used them to launch communications and weather satellites for the next few years. And as a result, the last Titan II launch was in October of 2003. And so the Titan II had a 40-year life. Now, a couple other things that are interesting about the Titan II. It was the first missile that was capable of being launched from a closed environment, this silo. In other words, it's in there fully loaded, the engines are fired off, and under full power it's leaving this missile. Now, they had to make sure that that would work, or leaving the silo. They had to make sure that worked because the tremendous noise that would be developed by these engines was capable of creating enough vibration that it could destroy or damage at least that very fragile missile. And the skin on that missile is about the thickness of a dime, so it's very thin. So what they did was they padded the inside of the silo with fiberglass panels. You see them in there. But the key thing was that just prior to launch, they would flood the bottom of the silo with an enormous amount of water. The heat from the engines, water, steam, the steam would absorb, or the energy that was involved there would absorb the energy that was involved by the vibration. So that enabled them to do that. Submarines, when they launch from submarines, they pop them out before they fire them. Now, I haven't mentioned shock isolation. You see springs on right behind me. But what about that missile? That missile is shock isolated. 330,000 pounds. It's shock isolated because it's mounted on the thrust spring, and that picture that you see there right behind there, you can see that stainless steel thrust ring, and when you go out to look at the missile from the viewing platform down, you'll be able to see that thrust ring. That missile is bolted to that thrust ring, and then that thrust ring is supported by 4 giant springs. 3 stories high those springs are, because it had to be able to support this entire weight. So, any vibration, that missile could ride it out. Just prior to launch, we would lock it in, and when the engines came up to the proper thrust, we would blow the bolts and we'd be on our way.
So would there have to be some adjustment in the guidance system, the initial setting, the inertial guidance system, if there were?
The inertial, try saying that, guidance system had a tendency to drift, so that they had to adjust it so often. But then when they made the change in the mid-70s, they got a guidance system that didn't drift. And so this thing was pretty good. It worked.
If need be, could this be reloaded?
Pardon me?
If need be, could this be reloaded?
It's possible, but that wasn't the plan. There were no spare missiles. That's one of the things, and like I say, no plan B, no crew.
So once the silo was set up with the initial missile, that missile and that silo were matched for the duration?
There we go. Okay, if you'll follow me out, and the people for the elevator, just wait at the elevator for Rex, and he will let you out. Watch your step.
Okay.
Thank you, Commander.
Thank you, sir.
Watch your step. Sir?
Now we're outside.
Yes. I think the rest are going to be able to go.
All right.
You got us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Better in line.
Thank you for offering.
there's a stage 1 engine. And there's where all the fuel would mix. two little cones would send out a signal, kind of like a beam. This cone to the other side, and then so each side had a beam that would be broken and used. A Doppler radar beam. I guess nowadays you'd probably do that with lasers.
This? Yeah.
This guy gives the equivalent horsepower, if you want to say, as the two 747s with all four engines running at the same time. So it's 440,000 pounds of thrust, which gets that 330,000 pound missile completely out of the ground in less than 4 seconds. It's not gravity fed because you don't have gravity in space. So these two turbines here have a solid fuel starter cartridge that takes it 2 seconds to get each of those turbines for the two nozzles going at 20. I think it's 24,000 RPMs. That's what sucks the fuel out of the engine compartments. I mean the missile compartments. Then all the explosion takes place right in here. And if you look in from the end, there's a whole series of holes side by side. The slightly larger holes are the oxidizer. The slightly smaller holes are the fuel, and that's how it comes out. And it's the same for the stage two.
So the ignition would take place in that cylindrical area
all the way up there is where that explosion it takes place because of it being.
But all on this side of that perforated.
All on that side of yeah, that's where all the fuel comes out. It's the same for the stage 2 engine.
Oh.
And then you're asking about after it separates, can it do any other adjustments? The answer is no. After stage 2 pulls away, it's a bullet going to its target. But the last thing you can do, these two vernier rockets are also solid fuel, and when that engine turns off, those burn for, I think it's 8 seconds maximum, and they can be cut off once they've done enough of the gyro work for adjusting its pitch, roll, and
So I assume that weather conditions and such were part of the navigational calculus to the extent that anybody had that information?
well, there's not much weather in space.
No,
The
but
only
what's-
weather is going to take the first 2.5 minutes to get from here to 50 miles altitude. So I don't
But
think
it would encounter high winds in the jet
it
stream or whatever on
could,
the way
and
down.
it would probably still be doing some readjustment of its direction as it's going up. And there is some directional control with that guy as well. But so I'm guessing that they probably didn't factor in too much on weather unless we were in the middle of a tornado, that kind of a thing. These are the two butterfly, the oxidizer lines, and that's the butterfly valve that has the pin in it. And these are the two fuel lines.
Very nice, thank you.
Otherwise, that's the whole thing.
What is this thing out here?
That's